Good morning and welcome to Rising. We're joined this week by Alyssa Farah. Kim is off. Alyssa, welcome back. What do we have?
Michael Starr Hopkins and Kelsey Bowler join us to discuss the January 6th rally that wasn't. In the Hill's Reed Wilson joins us to break down the rural-urban divide and the impact it could have on 2024.
But first, we want to discuss Friday's news that a drone strike carried out in Kabul by the U.S. military was a, quote, tragic mistake. According to defense officials, the results of their investigation revealed the strike killed an innocent aid worker and 9 members of his family. The Pentagon previously claimed that at least 1 ISIS-K member and 3 civilians were killed, now calling the strike a tragic mistake. Joining us now to weigh in is Afghanistan and Iraq veteran Lucas Kunce. Lucas is running for Senate in Missouri as a Democrat. Lucas, was this announced on a Friday in hopes that people would just not notice?
You know, it's hard to tell what they were thinking, but I think that for those of us who did notice, this is just a reminder that this is what war looks like. And so for any of us that were there, I was in Afghanistan in 2012-13, again in 2014. And I mean, people were dying then, people are continuing to die. And the more we have military involvement there, the more that's going to continue to happen. And so it should just be a good reminder for everyone, just like when the 13 U.S. service members were killed a few weeks ago, that what we've been doing there is not worth it and that we need to get out.
So in a recent op-ed in the Daily Beast, you write that since September 11th, Wall Street has put money over Marines and profits over patriotism. You recently announced that if elected to the U.S. Senate, you would end war profiteering by making it illegal for defense contractors to lobby members of Congress and outlaw them from having any impact on foreign policy. Can you expand on this?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm tired of seeing people convert, these guys, they convert people into profits. That's what they're doing. Like that drone strike that was a tragedy, people made money off of that. People made a lot of money off the Afghanistan war. We spent $2.3 trillion over there, or $6.4 trillion if you count Iraq and the rest of the Middle East. And all of that money, what did we build up there? Absolutely nothing. The people that made out were the defense industry and the Wall Street banks and Wall Street industrial insiders who back them up. And so for me, one of the most frustrating things about the last 20 years for me was seeing how, on September 11th, New York City was attacked, Wall Street was hit very hard, and the American people came together and stood behind them. And for the next 20 years, Wall Street spent all of their time profiteering off of the wars and profiteering off of people. I can give you a great example. When I was in Camp Pendleton in 2011, mind you, this is after we just bailed Wall Street out big time with a bunch of taxpayer dollars. I had Marine after Marine come into my office begging for help because these Wall Street banks we just bailed out and that we stood behind after September 11th were foreclosing on them illegally and kicking them out of their homes while they were fighting for our country. And so you see just instance after instance like that where Wall Street just takes advantage. And war profiteers are the same people saying, one more day, one more dollar, one more Marine, let's stay in Afghanistan. It's time we ended that connection between money and war.
And a lot of people who heard about this drone strike having actually not killed any terrorist and instead having killed an aid worker and his family weren't surprised by it because this had been the pattern for so many years in Afghanistan that either through some trigger-happy recklessness or some type of bad intelligence that was purposely misleading information spoon-fed to the U.S. for some other person's motivations had led to the wrong people being killed. When you were in Afghanistan, what types of problems did you see that were leading to these types of what they call a tragic mistake? But 20 years in, it's hard to just call it a mistake.
Yeah, this is warfare is confusing. It's hard. It's not like playing a video game. There is an enemy or there is an adversary who is trying to defeat you. They're trying to kill you. They're trying to hide themselves. There are civilians caught up in the mess. And really, I think that what we need to remember here is just this is what war looks like. People die in war, and it's not just service members, and it's not just, the military types. It's not just fighters. 240,000 Afghans died in this war. And so, we need to understand that this is what happens. It's not necessarily malevolence. It's just confusing. whenever U.S. service members get killed, there's obviously a desire to have reciprocity so that it doesn't happen again. And there's a lot of pressure. And so what we need to do is look at the bigger picture and make sure we stay out of situations where we are in, a confusing state, or we're in a place where there is a lot of pressure to act so that more people don't get killed. And in order to do that, we need to use other tools of statecraft to try to solve our problems. So, diplomacy, financial means, other sorts of pressure, international organizations, that's the answer here. Everyone will be better off.
So you make a good point about the different approaches that we could see and, using diplomacy and others going forward. But I have to ask you, since, you spent a lot of time in Afghanistan and are well acquainted with the threat environment in the country, do you have any concerns about a threat that could reach the homeland emerging from Afghanistan in this post-U.S. era in the country?
I think we always need to be concerned about that. We need to monitor what's going on. We destroyed Libya a few years ago and turned that into a safe haven for terrorists. There's other safe havens all over Africa. I mean, we need to keep it on the radar. We need to watch it. And we need to work with local sources to try to figure out what's going on there. And when I say that, I don't necessarily mean the Taliban, just, people on the ground. And we got to keep our eyes and ears open. But I will say this, the way to get more Americans killed and to have more engagements and more tragedies like we saw on Friday is to let the people who make a lot of money off these wars and have been saying one more day, one more dollar all this time, convince us to go back in or to go back in heavy. And, we need to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Louis, I also wanted to ask you about some breaking news this morning. It's being reported that Arizona Democrat Kyrsten Sinema has told President Joe Biden that if progressives in the House delay the vote on the bipartisan infrastructure bill that is scheduled for next week, then she's out when it comes to reconciliation. She won't support the party's $3.5 trillion reconciliation package. In your race, you've talked about a Marshall Plan for the Midwest. You're running to represent a state that is, significantly more Republican than Arizona. If you were in the Senate now, how would you be interacting with these negotiations around both the bipartisan infrastructure bill and the reconciliation package? Do you think that Sinema is making a mistake by trying to cut down and block the Build Back Better Act, the $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill?
I would do every single thing that I possibly could to invest in this country, invest in production, invest in the people who live here. I watched us spend double that amount, $6.4 trillion overseas, building up things that in Afghanistan collapsed in 2 weeks, and then Iraq was overrun by ISIS. Why are we willing to spend so much money on those and not spend our money at home? It makes no sense. It's because it's easier for, Wall Street, industrial complex, et cetera, to make money over there because nobody's paying attention. But I think it's time that we invest here in America and in production. And you know what? When they say we don't have enough money, I say we're printing $120 billion every single month in the Fed Reserve and dumping it right into 24 Wall Street banks. They get $120 billion a month and they have so much money they don't know what to do with it. But we're not willing to invest right here in our roads, in our hospitals, in our health, our healthcare, our education, and everything else. I think it's a tragedy. I would do whatever it takes to pass that stuff. It's going to be popular when it goes through because that's what people want. They want investment here in their country and in their lives.
So there was reporting this past week about a shootout in the Afghan presidential palace between Haqqani-aligned leaders and a more moderate Taliban leader who is advocating for a more inclusive Taliban government. And so the question on many people's mind in the U.S. is the U.S. should the U.S. recognize the Taliban as the legitimate government of Afghanistan, and should we open diplomatic relations? So, Lucas, if you were elected to the Senate, would you be in favor of recognizing the Taliban as the official government and opening diplomatic relations?
So right now, I think we need to see how things shake out. But what I do want to make sure that we do, and this is hugely important, is we have to make sure that we still have influence and we still have leverage in that country and with the leadership. In the late 90s, we had no leverage with the Taliban and they did whatever they want and it led to very bad things for us. And so, right now, though, we still have diplomatic leverage. We have financial leverage. We have non-government organizations, international organizations that we can use to leverage influence there. And so, there's going to be a lot of violence in that country. There was before. People are going to be jockeying for position. But what I want to make sure that we do is make sure that we still are able to have leverage over whoever's in control. can influence what's going on the ground to the best of our ability.
Great. Well, Lucas, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, guys. Always fun.
And we'll have more Rising right after this.